With so-called Freedom Day fast approaching, wearing a mask is going to become a personal choice. One minister has said that people will, quote, have to use their common sense on where and when to wear them.
But with the World Health Organization saying that even fully vaccinated people should continue to use a face covering to prevent the spread of the Delta variant, should the current rules stay in place for longer?
People have been very fed up with the mask, so I think it's going to differ from one person to the next. Other people will want to wear it, other people won't want to wear it.
The government's saying one thing and people are doing the opposite. So, you go into shops, they put masks on to go in them, and there's only about 2 or 3 people in a shop. Come out in the street, they immediately take the mask off, and they're shoulder to shoulder to everybody in the country.
I think I will still wear it in confined spaces, shops. It's common sense, isn't it, at the end of the day? And some people have got it and some people haven't.
Well, over the weekend, Government Minister Robert Jenrick gave his verdict on what he's going to do.
We are going to, I think, now move into a period where there won't be legal restrictions. The state won't be telling you what to do, but you will want to exercise a degree of personal responsibility and judgment.
OK. He actually said that he wasn't going to continue wearing a mask after July the 19th. And we spoke to another government minister earlier on last week who said the same thing. We have put this out to Twitter to ask you, will you continue to wear a mask once they are no longer mandatory? And this is the result. More than half of you will no longer wear them, but 47% will. So let's talk to Professor Susan Michie, a behavioural psychologist and member of SAGE, who believes the sensible thing is to continue with the restrictions, including masks, and Dominic Samuels, a political commentator, and will be glad to throw hers in the bin on the 19th of July. Professor Susan Michie, as a behavioural psychologist, do you think that it is now part of our behaviour to continue wearing the mask? Because for about a year, we've been told they actually are effective. Or will the legal restrictions being lifted on them mean that most people will ditch them?
Well, if we look at the evidence as to what's happened over the last 15 months of this pandemic, what we've seen is that people will take precautions where they see there's a serious threat to their health or the health of other people, when they think what they do will make a difference. So from that point of view, I think many people will continue, given we're in a very critical situation at the moment with up to 30,000 new cases a day, exponentially rising, a population that's partially vaccinated, which has 3 real problems. One is it means that with high transmission like that, we'll have more variants, and that means more chance of a variant that would undermine our vaccine programme. The second is we have an estimated 2 million people already living with long COVID, which can debilitate people for weeks, months, even up to a year. And thirdly, although hospitalisation is still low, it's rising. And further lifting restrictions will mean that rises even more in a situation where NHS staff are exhausted and we've got a huge backlog waiting list of urgent procedures that need to be done.
Well, the logical extension of everything you just said would be that you think that we shouldn't lift restrictions at all on the 19th and we should carry on exactly as we are. Am I right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, lifting restrictions will increase transmission. And with all the problems that I've just talked about, it doesn't seem to me the best time to do that.
All right, so
in
you're
fact,
saying we should stick...
if you remember a few weeks ago, we actually postponed lifting restrictions because the situation was so serious. But the situation's even more serious now than it was then.
Listen, there's a point I really have to put to you, and you'll be aware of this, because there's been a lot of commentary about this in the British media, about you. And it's to do with your politics. And you know I'm going to ask you. You've been a member of the Communist Party for about 40 years now. You're still a member. And we know that communism is basically statist. We look at communist countries around the world and we see that they are tremendously top-down dominant and control societies that they rule over. And I just wonder wonder, and I'm putting this question on behalf of those who wonder about your politics, if your politics actually informs your sense of control. It's not just the medical argument, but you have a kind of a political bent to want the state to tell people what to do.
I've come on your programme as a scientist, as do all people who come onto your programme as scientists. They come on to talk about the evidence, relevant theories, how we approach our scientific disciplines. And you don't ask other scientists about politics. So I'm very happy to speak about science, which is what my job is, and to limit it to that.
So you're saying that your politics doesn't inform your opinion on this subject?
I'm saying that I agree to come on this programme as a scientist, and I'm very happy to talk to you about the issues that you're raising as a scientist, which is the same for other scientists that you invite onto the programme.
That's a perfectly fair answer. Thank you for that. Hasn't your position changed a bit on masks? I seem to remember last year when the whole subject came into play in this country, you were quite cynical about their usefulness, weren't you?
I wouldn't say cynical. I was questioning, because at the beginning there was much more emphasis on droplets and transmitting versus sphere surfaces rather than aerosols. And as the science developed and progressed over the year, the evidence accumulated that actually the key transmission route was these tiny droplets, aerosols, that stay in the atmosphere for many, many hours. At the beginning, there was a discussion about, on the one hand, masks are helpful in terms of preventing droplet spread, but on the other hand, if they're not worn properly, if people are touching them and then touching other surfaces, there might be a chance of spreading it that way. However, the evidence about the effectiveness of mask use has also accumulated, and looking at the evidence, I became more and more convinced that the evidence for mask usage far outweighed anything else.
That's
and indeed, we do a systematic review of the evidence, which we keep updated. And that's also showing the same thing.
That's interesting, because we have Dr. Hilary here in the studio, and Dominic, don't worry, we're coming to you in just a moment. But Dr. Hilary, you and I had tussles over masks.
Yes, we did.
Back at the beginning of the pandemic, because I was all for wearing masks around April. But you, in the same way that the Professor did, you had issues with the fact that if you keep touching the mask, if you keep adjusting it, that might reduce its effectiveness.
Yep.
But the science has changed, hasn't it?
Science has changed, and it depends what kind of quality masks we're wearing and how we wear them. If we wear them round our chin, they're not going to work. If they're good quality...
I think we can all agree on that. We don't need the science to point that out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe we do. And also the fact that it traps aerosols better than droplets is also an important feature. I think people will be wearing masks in situations where it is relevant. So if you're going into a place with poor ventilation and a lot of people, you're protecting them and yourself by wearing a mask. Outside in the open air, far less so. So I think it's about where you wear them and how many people there are.
Well, let's bring Dominic in now. Dominic, what did you think of what Professor Michie had to say there?
Well, I think, as you pointed out, I think it's important for your viewers to know that Susan Michie also suggested that we should wear face masks forever. And she said that verbatim. So that's where Susan is coming from with that.
Dominic, sorry, you've stated something as fact that the person that you've stated it about denies.
It's fact. There's footage of
yeah,
Susan
I said forever to some extent.
To some
and it's
extent.
been misreported. Only one word of the 4 words I said has been reported. And this is, to some extent, depends on the situation you're in and how threatening the virus and the pandemic is around you. One would only, in the future, wear it if there was a real threat from the pandemic.
OK, that's qualified. So, Dominic, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, the end goal for you, though, if you're advocating face masks forever, and at the end of the day, in terms of where we are right now, we are not in dire straits right now at all. In terms of case rates, they are rising, but the link between hospitalisations and deaths and cases has effectively been broken. At around December 19th, 2020, when we had about 27,000 cases, there were 489 deaths and over 2,000 hospital admissions. At the moment, we're around 15 daily deaths and about 1,935 hospital
Dominique, those are the numbers with face masks being used. I mean, I'm concerned about, you know, we ditched the face masks. What impact is that going to have? Almost half of those who we polled said they will continue to wear face masks. Are there any situations where you might continue to wear them, or are you just glad to be rid of them from the 19th?
Well, I'm afraid the facts are that the evidence in terms of face masks is not completely conclusive, and that's because most people that wear face masks are wearing the surgical masks and the traditional facial coverings. The surgical masks do not protect you from smaller airborne particles, and that's from new research done by Cambridge University Hospitals that has recommended an upgrade for healthcare workers due to respirator masks being 47 times more likely to protect healthcare workers from infection. So the face coverings that people actually generally do wear don't actually protect you that much from the virus, because most people either aren't wearing them correctly or wearing the wrong mask, and that is why it should be based upon personal position to wear a face mask. In reality, it is more of a psychological exercise, which I think Susan Michie would be interested in due to her interest in behavioural science. It maintains an element of emergency, make people want to socially distance and convince people that we're still in a state of emergency, when with natural immunity and our fantastic vaccination programme, we just factually are not.
OK, can we just bring Professor Michie back in? Professor Michie, just to broaden it slightly, what did you make of our new Health Secretary's article in the Mail on Sunday yesterday? I don't know if you read it, but just to summarise it, basically, he has taken a completely different tack from his predecessor, from Mr Hancock. He's much more upbeat, he's much more optimistic, and in effect, what he said yesterday was that it was his job as the Health Secretary to look at the situation much more in the round, and not through the narrow corridor of COVID, but to look at all the other effects of lockdown and the health effects and the mental health effects it has, and he was seeing it from that point of view. Do you accept that overview that he presented yesterday?
I think it's absolutely essential to do everything we can to prevent going backwards on this roadmap and to make sure that we never, ever have another lockdown. But if we're to maximise the chance of going forward, we need to drive down community transmission. And the problem is that lifting restrictions is going to increase, not drive down community transmission. The other issue is about just handing over, sort of saying everything's personal responsibility. Now, if we look at other areas of our lives, that's not the case. We don't say to people, you can drive on any side of the road you fancy, at any speed you fancy. We actually have rules that protect other people. Or, for example, it's up to you whether you use a hard hat on a building site or whether you have a helmet on a motorbike. We have rules for these things to protect people themselves, but also importantly to protect other people. And one of the issues about a viral transmission such as COVID is that your behaviour doesn't just affect you, it affects other people. And so you can be transmitting the virus, not knowing it often. That's one of the problems about COVID, is so much is transmitted when people don't have symptoms, and other people suffer as a result.
Dominique, did you say you would wear a mask in any situation or none?
Yeah, just quickly, some of the points that Susan raised there. The examples that you gave was more so about a more immediate risk. And the issue with COVID is it's not an immediate risk. And that's why people who wear masks and people who have been double vaccinated in rare cases do catch COVID still. Because in life, you're always going to be exposed to an element of risk. That doesn't mean that the government has the right to micromanage what you choose to wear on your face, whether you choose to operate your business, and whether you can see a dying loved one. And that's a very important element. Well, personally, for me, I will not be wearing a face covering. I don't think it's necessary. But if people, by their own choice, want to do it because it makes them feel safe, because it doesn't actually make you more safe, if it makes them feel safe, then that's up to them.
Well, I have to say, I think both sides of the debate neatly mirror the national picture here.
Yeah.
I think what we heard from both of you there, thank you for that, is exactly really what we're getting from our poll and what people are saying out on the street. It really is pretty much 50-50. Thank you both very much indeed.